My near-death experience was caused by a motorcycle accident. I was the passenger. I had had a few drinks, which I thought was fine, considering I wasn't the one driving, and we were leaving a party. We'd only gotten a few kilometres down the road when I had the feeling that I had left a packet of cigarettes back at the house we had been at. Foolishly, I let one of my arms I'd been using to hold onto the driver go, so I could check. I must have distracted the driver because I can recall the moment I felt him begin to lose control of the bike. I shut my eyes tight and thought, I hope I'm right with you. I do not remember flying 10 feet up into the air or sliding 3 feet, but witnesses to the accident did. After that, I just recall being amongst clouds, or maybe it could be described as a thick fog, but it wasn't cold and I wasn't scared. Like many others that have told their tales of NDE, I felt safe and warm. As the fog cleared up, I was able to make out hundreds, maybe thousands of people, all walking in the same direction as I was. We were walking through the most beautiful, brightly coloured flowers I've ever seen. Everyone around me looked as content and as calm as I felt, and we were all smiling. I can recall walking past a huge, beautiful fountain that wasn't pouring water, and I know this sounds weird, but it was pouring like an energy, like a white liquid type energy. I was mesmerised and I stopped to watch it flow and pour. I could see something down by my feet darting around. Buster? I looked down to see my childhood dog. Despite having my eyes fixated on Buster, I was still very aware of everything around me. I knew that there was a group of people coming through the crowd towards us. They were bright and their features could not be made out. I looked up. The light beings had all split off, bar one, and he was standing right in front of me. He had changed from a light to the physical outline of a person, and although I couldn't make out his features, I was still very aware that he was a man. He put a hand on my left shoulder and began to lead me away. "We can't play ball right now, Buster," he said. I started to get upset and I wanted to cry. I didn't want to leave. "It's not your time yet," he said. The next thing I know, I am waking up in the ambulance to the sound of the paramedics yelling, "Clear!" This electric volt going through my body. The worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I had sustained some pretty serious injuries that took a long while to recover from. I can confidently say that I definitely changed after this accident. I used to hide behind a kind of tough girl exterior, but I don't wear that mask anymore. I'm now unapologetically myself. I'm also more attuned to how people are feeling, and if someone's having a negative thought that they haven't verbally expressed, I'll call them out on it. I haven't been wrong about that yet. Oh, and I also quit smoking. This is the story of the night I died at a house party. It wasn't unusual for my mates and I to do drugs. We lived in a pretty dodgy neighbourhood and virtually everyone that lived in that area used. This particular night I injected cocaine. 30 seconds had barely passed before I dropped to the ground. While I lay there frothing at the mouth, with my skin turning grey, my friends frantically called an ambulance. I have no recollection of what was happening around me physically at this time, but I was told when the paramedics arrived they could not find a pulse and I was pronounced dead. I was in what I can only describe as a large, open space, iridescent, with no beginning and no end, a place that felt warm and where I felt safe. Before me, just out of my reach, I could see my father and my grandmother, whom had passed years before. They weren't made up of physical matter, a visual energy rather, wispy and transparent. They looked at me with confusion, a look that seemed to say, "What are you doing here?" Despite their expression of concern, I felt no fear. Being in their presence gave me comfort, the kind of comfort you get from a big hug. And I knew whatever was going to happen, it would all be okay. Now this is when physical sensation started. Like a jellyfish caught in the waves of the ocean, I wobbled with great force. My father and grandmother started to fade out, and an unusually large man with a dark complexion and a petite woman that looked of Asian descent materialized around me. These apparitions were concurrent with the intense wobbling sensation I was experiencing. I try to make sense of all of this, and for a brief moment I think they must be making my bed, regardless of the fact I'm in it. I start to become aware of myself and the fact that I'm lying on my back. And as they shake me and I wobble, I start to feel whole again, like I'm being put back together. I'm aware of every hair on my skin and every cell in my body. My eyes slowly open. I have made it to the hospital. The nurses and doctor flutter around me. "He's awake," she says. They smile. "We couldn't find your pulse." They pull out a syringe and tell me they're putting me into an induced coma. When I come out of this 2 weeks later, I remember what happened, and I ask for the large man and the petite woman that shook me back to life. Even though I didn't understand exactly what they had done, I knew they had saved my life. I never did get a chance to show my gratitude because no one at the hospital knew of anyone that fit their description. One cold morning in 1984, I was driving home from a graveyard shift. My eyes grew heavier with each passing mile. Moments from being home, I approached the hill that led to my house when a fox appeared suddenly on the road. I swerved my vehicle and drove straight into a tree. My next memory of that morning is looking down at my body in the ambulance as paramedics worked on me. My face unrecognisable, but I knew it was me laying there in that gurney. You would think at this point I would have been feeling frightened, but I wasn't. In fact, I felt completely calm. As I watched from the corner of the ambulance, we arrived at the hospital. I looked on as they wheeled me into surgery, which is where I continued to watch as they cut me open. From surgery, I can clearly recall floating into the recovery room as I followed my body. It was when I saw the pain my girlfriend and parents were in that I started to feel some emotion. I watched as they sobbed and held on to each other. Also in the recovery room was my younger brother. He had died many years before in a drowning incident. He hadn't aged. He looked up at me and smiled, but didn't say a word. Now this part is very hard to explain, but without words, I was given a choice. I could go or I could go back. And that is the last thing I can remember about that. Coming out of the coma was awful. It was evident I was now fully back in my body. The peace and calm I had previously felt now replaced with physical and mental anguish. Once a few days had passed and I began to feel better, I told the nurses what I had experienced. They were astonished. They were especially stunned as I was able to relay what music had been playing in the operating room. Word got out and a doctor came to visit me after his shift had ended. He gave me the details for a support group for people that had experienced NDEs. I went to some meetings and learnt that not everyone's memories of their NDE is as clear as mine. Some are more fuzzy. What we did all have in common, however, was that these experiences had certainly changed our outlook on life. And we all expressed how materialism and the need to chase money had diminished and were replaced by a stronger appreciation of the little things in life, like human connection and the beauty of nature. One hot summer's day, I threw my head back to take a swig of coke. Dunk. All went black. I had fallen back, cracking my skull on the curb. As onlookers called an ambulance, I travelled up through the universe. I came to a tunnel where I met what I can only describe as a being made of golden light. At this time, I now had a sort of 360-degree vision. I could see the front of me, the sides of me, and I could even see the back of me as I stood behind myself in this tunnel. The being came toward me, the brightest golden light I've ever seen. I could only see his silhouette because of all the light around him, so I couldn't make out any definite features. He reached out from so far away, yet when his hand came up to my face, the size of his hand was infinite. It cascaded around me, and whoosh, he pushed me back through the tunnel made of light. It felt so warm and full. The warmth wrapped itself around me like the sun pouring in through the window and onto a big, comfortable bed that's been made with the softest, freshest linen you could ever imagine. I better wake up now, I thought. I bolted upright, scaring those around me. I was told later that they thought I had died there on the spot because I'd laid so still. Despite feeling like I'd been sleeping for hours, I'd only been out for about 90 seconds. I'm no longer scared of death, but this experience has certainly made me look at things differently. I took up photography shortly after I hit my head, and sometimes when I'm outside I look up to the sun and I shut my eyes. The light creates patterns behind my lids, and as I let the sun warm my skin, I think back to that day, and I thank that golden light for sending me back. And I tell him that one day when this is over, we will meet again. I wish everyone knew what I knew, that God lives. And no, I'm about talking about religion.